All right, here we go. OverDrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 2 all afternoon. Brian Hayes and Frankie Corrado. What's happening, Frankie?
Hey, buddy. I missed you the last couple of weeks. I have a question for you right off the hop. Like, when you take 2 weeks off, do you just bottle up all the takes that you have and then just like now you got to spill them all out? Or do you have takes with the people you're around? Like, does your wife get the takes, kids? Like, do you have to just let it all out?
No, nobody gets anything. I get away from as much of it as I possibly can. I don't watch a lot of sports. I try to keep track. And you know what I learned? Because I've been doing this long enough where I can start to talk about, back in my day and back when I used to do this. Like, I've reached that point in my career where I actually can reference different things that I've done in the past. I remember I used to do that, which was so selfish, so ignorant, so stupid. And what I mean by that is I would bottle up takes and then bring them to the mic when I got back.
Yeah.
Like, hey, 10 days ago, something happened. Like, no one's tuning in right now saying, I wonder what Hayes has to say about that Danny Jansen trade because, he missed out on that. And I got a real take about him going to Boston.
I think the opposite. I don't
agree with you.
I think people have been tuning into the show. They haven't seen you. And they're like, I need to know Hayes' take on everything that happened. And I wonder from your point of view, too, like, are you up at the cottage with the family, like you're about to jump in the lake, and you're like, hold on a sec, I got to give you guys my take on something.
It's the complete
McIntosh take.
Complete opposite. Like, I did find myself getting more and more into the Olympics. Like, I think if you're around the house and your schedule's kind of out of whack and you have the ability just to tune in, you pick up on the beauty of the Olympic Games.
Right.
Because I am never hyped for the Olympics, ever. For the summer games, the winter games, I might be because of the pro athletes that go, and we'll get into what happened with the basketball team today. So there's a lot of hype. Who's going to make the team? How's the rotation going to work? Clearly with the winter games, there's a lot of hype. Who's going to make the team? How are the lineups going to work out? Who are they going to play? Can they possibly win? So I get hyped for that. But I'm not hyped for, like, the hammer throw back in March.
Dude, we are a hammer throw nation
We
now.
dominate. Men's and women's gold hammer throw. Who wants a piece?
We are hockey and hammer throw.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
We do that at the most elite level, and no one on earth can touch us. Hockey and hammer throw, step aside, you're playing for second, because that's basically what we're all about. But I'm not talking about it. I don't know anybody. I'm not hyped for it. And then all of a sudden, you'll tune in, and it's all spontaneous, right? Like, I did find myself, I think like a lot of Canadians, wondering, when is Summer McIntosh going to swim? When is Summer swimming? I want to know. Okay, let me make sure that I'm ready to go for when Summer's about to swim. When's Andre DeGrasse going to run? Right, out of respect to Andre, he's had such an incredible career. When's he running the 100 heat, the 200 heat? That's the kind of stuff. And then the stars of the games, you're aware of. Simone Biles, when is she going? Noah Lyles, when are they going to go? The championship match in terms of the men's side in tennis, Djokovic and Alcaraz was just an incredible match. That was something I happened to be watching. I got locked in, and I'm like, I'm a part of this. But I found myself just kind of tuning in. I'm like, all right.
Nice. Hey, it's
I'm in. What is
it's
this?
Free.
What do we have? Like last night, it was pole vaulting where the Swedish kid was breaking records, his own records. And I just happened to be tuned in. I'm like, let's see what he's got.
There was a tough bounce for one of those pole vaulters, wasn't there?
Was it? I don't know if it was a tough bounce. It may have actually been the greatest move of all time for that guy.
Listen, he didn't plan it that way, but boy, was that strategic.
Yes.
And that might play for him for quite a while. There
Here's
might
what
be
I
a
can
curiosity factor.
Here's
there.
what I can guarantee you. He has a new profile pic. He has a new profile pic. And from a sporting standpoint, it was the most heartbreaking moment of his career. For everything else, he may actually have broken loose into some completely different area that he was not expecting.
He might be getting into a new industry soon.
There's a very good chance that cat, there's some doors that may have opened, right? Some poles may have dropped, but some doors open.
He needs to check his DMs ASAP.
Yes, if they weren't open them, right? Get out of that village or stay in the village. I don't know what he's doing. He could be doing anything. But, so as a result, I just found myself being, regular Canadian guy tracking the Canadian Olympics and seeing what's going on. And it's been a fun ride so far. I do think, and we'll get into this later this afternoon with our Something to Chew On brought to you by Boston Pizza, where we're asking, through the lens of a Canadian, has it been more positive or a negative experience And there's been a number of positives. Like we said, in the pool, Summer McIntosh has been great. The hammer throw. And there's a number of great stories that come out of nowhere that you don't expect.
Judo? Like judo was
exactly.
another one. No idea what judo even is, but we won a gold medal.
We got one, exactly. Bronze in a number of different areas. It feels like we finished 4th in so many different events.
Dude, that 10,000-meter run.
Had it. Silver.
That 4th place was heartbreaking
Crushing.
to watch because it's the most grueling race.
Yes.
And then you just fall that short.
Just fall that short.
Man.
And, Damian Warner obviously couldn't repeat, and he was a great champion. He's a great Canadian athlete, but he didn't get there, and then he ends up actually pulling out of, his event. So there's been ups and downs. I think Summer McIntosh, she is the face of the games, like undoubtedly. If you're a Canadian, for someone that's 17 to show up and do what she's done, to have that level of expectation and follow through on it, win 3 golds and a silver, and to think where she's going to be in 4 years when they get to LA and she's 21 and in her prime, like she has a chance to be the queen of the LA Olympics, which is going to be incredible, I think, from a Canadian standpoint, because there's going to be so much hype, yet it's going to be on American soil. So the Americans, they're coming with heat. They do every single game. They're doing it again. They're lapping the field again. The Americans are always going to do that. But I think there's been a number of positive things. But for me, it's leaning more negative because of the first story before the games even started was Dronegate with the soccer team. Credit to the women for getting through the group stage, which was incredible. And then they fall short in penalties. Germany's a good team, but still, end of the road. A lot of anxiety, I'm sure, building up within that team. I felt horrible for the athletes, the staff, the federation. They got a lot to answer for. And the athletes ultimately had to fall on the sword for them. They end up dropping out. They can't repeat gold from 4 years ago. And then you look at men's basketball and what happened this afternoon. And there's a lot of complaining. I think a lot of it justified in terms of the officiating. Free throws were 25-8 in favor of France.
Outrageous.
In the first half, which is outrageous. But what was it we were talking about this team constantly leading up to the tournament? They had no size.
No size.
And I think the refs, what ends up happening, and it happens in the NBA as well, if you have a reputation of being a smaller team, and if you're going up against a bigger team, which France is, and Wemby in particular,
who had a quiet day. It was a quiet game for him.
Yet he shows flashes that you watch him and you think, or at least I was thinking, this guy, when he puts it together, if he stays healthy, I cannot help but have those conversations whenever I'm watching him or talking to people about Wemby, is how is he going to stay healthy, a guy that big?
He's 7'4", man.
He's massive, and he's so thin. He's so skinny, and he's so tall. Yet when he puts it together, we just talked about Summer McIntosh, when this guy gets 24, 25 and has chops and skin in the game, how are you going to stop him?
I know.
How? I have no idea how you stop Wemby in the future.
I don't know how you do it. Like offensive rebounds, obviously, like he's getting those just by the fact that he's
a couple of big
tall.
blocks in the second half.
Exactly.
Too late in the game.
But yeah, he wasn't as big of a factor as you would have expected in that kind of game. And even Rudy Gobert, who's, big name guy, NBA presence, like Rudy Gobert was, I don't know, he was hardly noticeable in that game. It was other guys. It was guys that you never heard of. And that's got to be the biggest takeaway, when you look at that game for Canada. It's like you had Shea, you had Dylan Brooks on the defensive side of the ball. You had all these things, all these NBA guys, and you couldn't get it done against, a good team in France, but not a team that was going to overwhelm you. You didn't lose to the Americans.
No, exactly.
Like you really left one on the table.
Yeah, they were a pretty heavy favorite going into the game. It was going to be difficult because France, home soil, again, the fact that Jamal Murray is the story of the game. I think most Canadians, if you watch the game, he shot horribly. He was really, really porous with the ball in terms of ball control, in terms of turnovers. He never looked himself. And I think he was probably banged up. He didn't really play the preliminary games. He didn't really play a lot during the buildup. But that's a guy you needed. Like, this was Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's team, clearly Shea's team. But Jamal is a great number 2, and that was your backcourt. That was what was going to separate Canada from every other nation except for the Americans.
Yep.
Like, you're likely going to run into the States at some point, and you're going to be in tough. And the States is playing Brazil right now. They're spanking them. The door's wide open for them to cruise to a gold medal. I think they end up doing that. But this was 24 years in the making. They had not been into the Olympic Games for 24 years. All this NBA talent. You're in the group of death. You go 3-0. And then you get France. Again, it's tough, but it was going to be tough. The 8 remaining nations are all good teams and all going to be difficult to play considering the circumstances. Shorter games, more physical. Who knows where you're going to get out of the officials. and Canada just didn't play well enough.
No.
And they didn't shoot well enough. They had a horrible start. Yes, the officiating factored into that, but they were down big early, and they never got back in the game. They chased it. They didn't quit, but they never really took control of it again. And now you're out. You're not going to medal. And I don't think people are prepared. I know I'm not. I don't want to hear about 2028.
No kidding.
Like, this was a 24-year buildup. This was your chance. You have Shea in his prime. You have Jamal Murray in his prime. Lou Dort's a stud defensively.
Yeah.
Dylan Brooks is still a guy who's very capable at this point. Couldn't get it done.
No, and when you look back at the preliminary games where they go 3-0, it felt like they found something each time. You know what I mean? Like they found that they were able to defend in game 2, where in game 1, like it felt like it was slipping away from them, even though they had the big lead against Greece. Like you could see the improvement happening for the team. And then it wasn't just us that was noticing Canada. It was like everyone was noticing Canada. And all of a sudden you flip on the TV and you watch NBA Today or ESPN, you go on ESPN.com and it's like, Canada's a serious threat. Canada is the team that is the most legitimate threat to the United States and getting in the way of their gold. And for it to end that way, it's so anticlimactic. It's so disappointing because you showed the improvement. You got on notice with everyone else. And now you weren't able to push through that last little bit, which was beating France, a very beatable team.
Yep.
It was very attainable. And it didn't happen for a number of reasons. Like you said, Jamal Murray, not big enough, got pushed around the paint, didn't get free throws, all that kind of stuff. It just, it didn't happen for one game. And that's the nature of a tournament
That's
like
the
this,
nature
where it
of
is
it.
one game.
Yeah, and again, if you have a history, which it's not these individual players' fault, that there was, decades of either inaptitude or a program that couldn't connect, or just you missed by the thinnest margins. But it's a buildup of decades to get here. And this is the thing about the Olympic Games is you got to wait 4 more years to get your next crack at it. Like 4 more years before you can go back. And I have no doubt, like there's more and more Canadians coming into the NBA every single year. The Canadian men's side, the men's program is bigger and better and more deeper than it probably ever has been, certainly. And I have no question they're going to find a way to get there. But even getting there, like they had to go to the World Cup, they had to place, they had to push the envelope just to get in. And then they looked as good as they did through the group stage. And for it basically to go up in smoke, felt like 10 minutes into that game today.
Yeah.
Like they were down 17-4, I think it was, like early and quick, 17-5.
It was over. It was over. It was a road. I think the closest they may have got it to was 5. Like I saw it at 6. Maybe I saw it at 5 at one point. I'm
they
thinking,
pushed it
like
late in the game. They came back.
There is a chance, but obviously it's not enough, especially when you dig yourself that kind of hole. And that's, you know what, when we look back at the Olympics, I think that ultimately ends up being a negative story. DroneGate ultimately ends up being a negative story. But I still do believe, like, having Summer McIntosh, the 17-year-old who's not only just dominant, on a Canadian scale now, like dominant on the world stage.
Yes.
Where everyone has kind of, been put on notice that this is the person that's going to dominate in the pool for the foreseeable future, and she's Canadian. Like, I think that should be the story that overshines all the negative stuff. And DroneGate is going to keep, it's going to keep
That's
going.
why I
it's going to
think
keep
DroneGate,
evolving.
yes.
It's going to turn into, hey, they were doing it at this tournament, under 17, under 18. Like, it's going to be more than just the Olympics for DroneGate.
Yeah, and I think, again, because Summer McIntosh is going to be a part of the Olympic Games likely for the next 8 years, maybe 12. I mean, you never know with swimming. And a lot can happen. She's still she's a young girl. She's turning 18, I believe, next week, in a couple of weeks. But very young athlete. Yet she seems very, very committed to her craft.
How poised.
She's incredibly poised, incredibly impressive, and obviously an all-world talent, like a generational talent. There's no reason to believe she won't just continue to grow in 4 years, and then likely again 8 years from now. So if she follows that through, it will be McIntosh. Like, that's what will be remembered. I did a hit on SportsCenter yesterday, and we talked about Simone Biles, and Biles 8 years ago did effectively what Summer McIntosh did in these games. Like, she showed up for the first time. She was very young, but everyone knew she was coming. Everyone knew she was a phenom. And I think she walked away with like 4 golds and just lit the gymnastic worlds on fire 8 years ago. In Tokyo, she couldn't really compete, and she had some real struggles.
She had the twisties?
Yeah, she had the twisties where she couldn't
go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, not to get too technical, but that is the term that they use. And she basically had to take herself out of competition. And then for her to culminate an incredible career with what she did, the last 7 or 8 days in Paris, it allows for you to look back on those first games for her and then say, wow, look at the whole picture. And the same thing could apply to Summer McIntosh. If she walks away 8 years from now with double-digit gold medals, which I think is a real possibility, certainly 12, 13, 14 medals, if not more than that, and goes down as the greatest Canadian Olympian of all time, which I think she would if that were to happen, then this will be the games where it all started. If that doesn't happen, then I would lean the negative, and I would lean DroneGate being the story we'll remember the most, because I don't think it's going to go away.
No, it's
John
not.
Herdman's going to have to answer for this.
Oh, it's coming.
John Herdman's going to have to answer. There's going to be sanctions. There's going to be more and more conversations, more and more investigations. It's not going to stop.
And the whole defense that everyone does it, sure. Maybe everyone does do it.
You got caught.
You got caught, and you flew it in a no-fly zone in Paris, France, at the Olympic Games. Like, you were so careless with it. So you kind of deserve to get caught at that point.
And it happened before the games. If it came out afterwards, in retrospect, they looked at the tape, or they found someone saying off the record and they looked into it and investigated. Like, if 4 weeks from now it came out, turns out this is what happened, and now they'll be sanctioned the next time they play, no one would really be talking about it as much. It would get a fair amount of oxygen and attention. But the fact that it broke like 48 hours before the opening ceremony, and then was the launch into the games, was Canada is cheating. Like, the whole world's like, what the hell are these Canadians doing? We're all coming together in Paris. We're all going to try to compete. Everyone's going to try to put aside the rest of the craziness around the world here.
We're wearing some like goofy Lululemon stuff.
We got some wild stuff going on. The bacon strip jackets are pretty wild, and we have drones flying around our opponents' facilities. Like, come on now.
It goes without saying, like, we always have to preface this by saying that the players got jammed up.
Yes.
Like, you jammed up
I was
the
rooting
players.
for them to go and win a gold now.
Of course.
And the players basically to drop it and say,
yes,
chew on that, Bev Priestman and anyone else.
Exactly. Thanks for sewering us.
Yes.
We still got this. We're still the best in the world. We're not having that conversation because they're out now, but like, that's what everyone was cheering for. Go ahead, girls, and show everyone. And ultimately, they got jammed up. You trust people.
Yeah.
And they,
especially like
they got
coaches and like I wouldn't say superiors, but like Bev Priestman is not young. John Herdman's not young. Like, there's a lot of young athletes on these teams. And there's players that are fighting to make the team. They want to be on the team. They're not going to say anything
It's
about
so hypocritical, though, because as like coaches always talk about accountability.
Oh, all the time.
Right?
It's like Babs. Mike Babcock's the king of it.
Yeah.
You got to do it right every single day.
Yeah.
Oh, really, Babs? You were doing it right? Creeping on people's phones was doing it right every day.
Yeah.
If you do it right every day, it's going to work
Just
for you.
wanted to know about your family.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's all it was.
And they just wanted to know what New Zealand's set pieces were.
That's all they were doing.
That's all.
Totally reasonable activity.
Yeah.
Totally reasonable. Something to chew on, brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. Summer is short, so make sure you make the most of patio season at BP. Join us for a long lunch or a late night, and see you for a pint on the patio soon. Again, you can vote for that at OverDrive 1050 on Twitter. Again, there's still more to come here in terms of, Canadian storylines and the Olympic Games and, what could still happen over there. But the men's basketball team is out. They lost to France earlier today. Leo Rautins will join us. His take on what went wrong, his take on Jamal Murray's play, his take on the officiating. How do we build for 4 years from now when we get to L.A.? Was this, the best opportunity we've ever had to medal? I think that goes without saying, but what happened here? We'll get to Leo on that and more. And the Jays are back in action with Baltimore in town. We'll tee up the series with Keegan Matheson coming up a little bit later this afternoon. Confirm or deny at around 5:30. Frankie Corrado's in here. I'm Brian Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. OverDrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Leo Rautins here in a moment on Canada losing to France earlier this afternoon. They're out. No medals for men's basketball, and I felt good about them chasing gold. I really did. I think beating the Americans is going to be incredibly tough to do. Beating the Americans' B squad would be incredibly difficult to do. But they should have beaten France. Like, France was not a layup by any means, but I think the spread, they were certainly a favorite. They have more NBA talent. Tough draw because you're playing the home side. You're in France. That building was obviously, it was like a road game for Canada. The officiating was pretty awful, and it definitely skewed in favor of France. But Canada's ball control was pretty poor. Their shooting was pretty poor. Jamal Murray really struggled. Their size was overmatched. They're out.
The same way you talk yourself into, or you can talk yourself into, Canada beating the U.S. because it's a one-game thing, I'm sure that's what France was saying about Canada. Exact same thing. Mm-hmm. One game, we can beat these guys, strong in the paint. Whatever their strategy was, it obviously worked for them, but that's the nature of it. And Canada had one game to lose. They lost that game. And now they don't get the chance to see if they can upset the United States.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. So France is through, and Leo will join us here in just a moment. Keegan Matheson coming up from the Park, Jays Orioles tonight. Also, The Athletic, for I think 9 years now, I believe I read that this morning, they've been doing like fan surveys, and fans have been ranking the respective front offices throughout the NHL.
Yeah.
And we'll get to this at 5 o'clock, but I don't know if Leaf fans listening or watching would be surprised at where the Leafs ranked. I was, though, and I think it's ridiculous where they ranked.
I was, too.
Okay.
I was surprised, and I will say this. I was surprised at the team above them. Maybe I got thoughts on the team that was right above Toronto because it was like a package deal, and I was like, wait a second, something doesn't add up here.
There was a lot of the Shanaplan era represented around the Leafs,
yes.
Right in front of the Leafs and a couple back of the Leafs.
Right.
It was all the Shanaplan.
Yeah, it was.
The
exactly.
whole thing was the Shanaplan.
Yeah, and let's just say it was not very high.
It was an unfortunate set of circumstances.
Was it very high on the list?
It's no one's fault.
It's an unfortunate set of circumstances. It's no one's fault.
So we'll tell you about that at 5.
Yeah.
And you may actually hear something you never thought you'd hear me do, and I'm going to go to bat for the Leafs. I'm going to bat for the front office. Okay, I'm going to go bat. I'm going to go to bat, and I'm going to step in, and I'm going to launch one to right field for the Leafs at around 5 o'clock. So we'll tell you about that just at 5. But again, Canada's out on the men's side, and this was, I think, the best team we've ever put together. It was 24 years in the making. We were waiting to get back to the Olympic Games. It was a hell of a journey to get there. Group stage was amazing. Tough draw, but the 8 teams remaining, they're all good teams. You know, the Americans are a shade ahead of everybody, if not multiple shades ahead of everybody. But the other 7 teams are going to have to fight it out, see who would win silver, who could win bronze. And we know France is through. Canada's going home. To chat about it, here's our TSN NBA and basketball analyst. Here's Leo Rautins. Leo, your general breakdown of the game. What happened there this morning or this afternoon, and why did it get away from Canada, in your opinion?
Well, it's always good to be with you guys. Unfortunately, you know, my concerns, and, you know, I think I've expressed it with you guys, that my concerns were size and shooting, especially up front for this team. And, you know, that really became a factor. I mean, France jumped out early. And when I say size, I'm not necessarily referring to, you know, Gobert and Wemby. Just if you look at overall size of teams, and you know, France just came out very aggressively. They jumped on Canada, and they're a very talented, athletic team. And I think people look at, like, if you look at the NBA players they weren't big factors in that game. But if you look at the players that have NBA level talent, but a ton of FIBA experience, were the factors. And, you know, from a Canada side, you know, outside of Shea, you know, RJ competed, but they struggled. They really struggled. And when you think about going into this tournament, everybody talked about one thing. Arguably, Canada had the best backcourt coming in. And part of that backcourt was missing, and that was Jamal. And by no fault of his own, he was battling. I saw him pre-France, but I saw him when they were in Toronto in camp, and he was fatigued. He didn't look healthy. He didn't look right. And they tried to kind of bring him along, but he was never himself. And if you take the best backcourt out and cut it in half, and then factor in the other things I'm talking about, you can understand what happened. I mean, the guys competed, the guys played, but, you know, their shortcomings caught up with them.
Could you put into context how big of a disappointment this is, or how big of a shame it is that Canada is not advancing, Leo?
I think shame is a very strong word. I would never use that word. I think it's a big disappointment, and as much for those players as anything else. These guys are confident. These guys were committed. They were 100% in this thing to win a medal, and so there's extreme disappointment. And I think a lot of fans expected them, but I remember when I was coaching, I tried to say this to people about the international game. How many of these guys have been in Olympics and have played in this kind of a tournament? Nobody. And you look at the international teams they're playing against, these guys have experience. These guys, and it's not an excuse, but it matters. It matters a lot. And, you're playing, France has underperformed to some degree in this tournament, but they're at home. They're playing in Paris. So, you're talking about a team that's just going to die on the floor playing against you. So, disappointment, yes. Shame, absolutely not. Not a chance. I mean, these guys gave it what they had, and like I said, there were some shortcomings, and it caught up with them.
I more just meant, Leo, like, how someone says, "Oh, it's a shame." Like, I didn't mean shame in that context.
It's not like shameful.
Yes,
you think
yes,
they
not
should
shameful.
not be allowed back in the country.
If you've watched Seinfeld, oh, that's a shame.
Right.
Like, that's the context.
I get what
just
you're
to
saying.
Clarify.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Well, it's definitely a shame. It's definitely a shame in that regard.
Yeah, it is. And, you mentioned Jamal, and Jamal Murray really, really struggled. Like, he really struggled with the ball. His decision-making, his shooting was really off today. And like you said, coming into this, you needed your best from everyone, but specifically that backcourt. They needed Gilgeous-Alexander and Jamal Murray to be at their elite status to have a chance to maybe chase down the Americans or certainly finish in the top three. Yet that wasn't the case with Jamal. You said you saw him before you even went over. He just was never at 100%. So looking back on it now, hindsight being 2020, should Jordi Fernandez have handled him differently? Should he have been given the minutes he got today? Because he played a lot, and it just never came together for him.
Well, I think a lot of coaches will roll the dice with their best players, right? And I thought Jordi did a pretty good job throughout the tournament in easing Jamal into it, right? Brought him off the bench, watched his minutes. I thought he did a great job psychologically saying, hey, I'm really happy what he's doing. He's coming along. And then you get to the center stage and you try to ride your best guys. And, hey, how many times have you seen a player of that magnitude where, they're not 100%, but they come through. They come through with big games. And Jamal Murray has had a history of big games. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to get to himself. And, when you're playing and you're not right and you're trying to do things and mistakes happen, your legs aren't there, you miss shots, and it kind of compounds everything, right? It builds, and your confidence really takes a hit because you could see he was very frustrated with a lot of things he was trying to do. And as well as a response to what you're asking, I mean, Andrew Nembhard did not have a good game today. Mm-hmm. He was not there. Dylan Brooks, Dylan's your energy guy. He's a guy that's screaming, fighting, getting in people's faces. I would have loved to have seen him just knock somebody in their ass in the first play of the game. But he wasn't himself, right? He wasn't himself. And you can go down the line. Kelly Olynyk has struggled immensely in the last few games for this team. Just go down the line. And when you're in the Olympics, we see this in every category of the Olympics. If you're not 100%, it's hard. It's hard because now you're in the NCAA tournament. The quarterfinals, you're in the NCAA tournament, one and done. You don't make it, you don't win, it's over. And on a given day, a team can roll. And today, France rolled. They played tremendous basketball.
With Leo Rautins, the officiating is, it's always going to come up in the NBA, in the Olympic Games, the World Cup. It doesn't matter where it is. The first half, the free throw discrepancy was 25-8 in favor of France. What did you make of the officiating today, and how big of a storyline should that be for Canadians who are griping right now?
It shouldn't be. Here's the thing. I honestly, and I'm saying this from the heart, as a guy that played and coached in FIBA officials drive me crazy. Okay, there's just so much stuff that happens. It's just ridiculous. Okay. However, who punched first in this game? Who came out and just started swinging? It was France. Mm. And Canada. There were a lot of silly fouls, a lot of reaching, a lot of grabbing, a lot of silly fouls. And if you look at what France did, I mean, they're going, hey, we're going inside. Hey, we're going to post you up. We're just going to attack you. We're just going right at you. And everything was a late response. You had Dylan Brooks in a matchup in the post, and all of a sudden, Lou Dort would come in and just reach in and swipe and get the players on. Well, why? Dylan Brooks is a good defender. He's got a guy right there. Why are you reaching in and fouling in a situation like that? Fouling on shooters, which has kind of been a problem in this tournament. So it was a big discrepancy early, but that's when Canada played their worst basketball. The discrepancy lessened in the second half when Canada was more aggressive and they got themselves back in the game. They got to 4 points, and the calls were much more even. But one of the things Canada did well in the first 3 games is they were able to play with a lead. And when you're in FIBA, you want that lead because you want the cushion for when there are bad calls, for when things aren't going to go your way. And you're in Paris. You're playing France. That's like being in, at the Garden playing the Knicks. So you're not getting a call, when you're on the road, you're not getting a call down the stretch or unless you're just dominating and controlling the game. And it wasn't Canada's day, and France was the dominant team. And I've always said it. I say it on NBA games. The team that's the aggressor, the team that's fouling for 40 minutes, for example. Hey, the Pistons won a championship doing this. You foul for 40 minutes, you attack for 40 minutes. Officials got to decide what they're going to call and what they're not going to call. And when you're aggressive, you get the call. Simple as that. And France was that team today.
So now that, this men's program keeps moving forward, how much of that, what you just said, is going to be a learning experience for these guys? Or is there too much time between now and 4 years from now that, the team's going to look different, the thought process is going to look different? Like, how much from today or this tournament do they take and kind of move forward with?
I think you take a lot. I still think there's going to be carryover with players. You hope there is. Shea is a great centerpiece for this team. And certainly Jamal healthy is a factor. And you've got young guys as well as young guys coming up. I mean, like a Ben Mathurin would have made with his shooting could have been a huge factor, but he wasn't able to play with his shoulder. There's a player, again, I don't know if I said it on your show, but I've said it, Kyle Roach is a 7-foot shooting big man that I even spoke with Rowan Barrett saying, I would not go in this tournament without him. So there's players internationally, there's players in the league, there's players coming up, and these players that are there now and other players that have participated in getting them there. You got a Shaden Sharp was in camp, but not ready yet. But you're going to have a lot of guys and a lot of bodies. Edey would have made a difference. His size alone would have made a difference. You're going to have him. So and I think that's a big focus. You've got to get bigs. You need bigs. So my optimism hasn't changed. It's disappointing, and everybody expected more, especially these guys. But the game is growing, and there's players coming. There's more, and I think that the fact that they got where they got obviously didn't get their ultimate goal, but they got into the qualifiers. That I think excites young players. I think they're more and more going to want to play and be a part of this. So the future's still bright, and there's a core to build on. I'm still excited about what the future is going to hold for Canada basketball.
With Leo Rautins, and what we saw today too was two, I think, current faces of the NBA, certainly future faces of the NBA, going up against each other, in Shea and Wemby, and like Victor Wembanyama is just a freak of nature. Watching this kid just prance around, and like he had a block on Dylan Brooks at the end of the game. I don't even think he left his feet. It's just he's a marvel. Like watching him play, if he stays healthy, the guy I think will eventually be unstoppable or real close to it. Shea's incredible. Jokic is incredible. Giannis is incredible. Luka's incredible. I guess what I'm getting to here, Leo, is the explosion of international talent. And, the big three Americans in LeBron, KD, and Steph, they're all on like hole 17, 18 of their career. Like, it's the end of the road for the three of them. They're still great players, but they're at the end of the road here. Do you see this now as like the next decade, if not more than that? It's going to be international faces of the NBA. Is that possible down in the States? Like, how do you see this conversation weaving in and out as we move forward here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the international players, there's going to be more and more of these guys in the NBA game and the pro game because they're taught differently, right? They're, I don't know who made the point when Shea, the young kid that was drafted from France, everybody goes, look at his stats, like 9 points, whatever. Yeah, but he knows how to play. He's playing the game the right way. Luka Doncic didn't average 30 a game before he came to the NBA, but he knew how to play in a winning atmosphere. So all these guys in these European leagues are playing high-level ball from the time they're 16, and they're playing to win. They're not playing to get stats. They're playing to win. And it changes their development. And I think that's where North American ball is kind of taking a step backwards in development of a young player. So, we're seeing a lot of that. And, you made the point about Wemby. He struggled today, right?
Yeah.
But look what was around him. Like I said, it wasn't the NBA players that won that game for France. It was the NBA level talent with a boatload of FIBA experience that won that game. And so Wemby can come in and just get better and better in that environment. Just like he's learning in San Antonio how to be an NBA player in that France environment. The pressure's not on him to carry the team. At one point it will be. And so if you look at Shea, for example, I thought, he was amazing this whole tournament. I love his game. There's nothing about this guy I don't love. But in this game, he did everything he could to carry it, but there wasn't that help around him, right? Other guys weren't there. And part of that is experience. Part of that is being there, been there, done that. So, the international game is growing. The game is growing, period. But, Canada's going to have a lot of guys in the mix, and that's always a great thing.
All right, Leo, we'll leave it there. Good stuff, buddy. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Leo Rautins. I think, you look at the future of the NBA, where this is always a conversation, can you be the face of a league if you're not American? I know there's been that conversation before in other leagues. But the NBA, like the greatest players in NBA history, like the top 5, top 10, they're all American.
They are.
Like it's MJ, it's LeBron, it's Magic, it's Bird,
right.
It's Kareem. But now, like if I gave you these 5 international players, Wemby, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Jokic, Giannis, Luka, those 5 for the next 5 years, or Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, John Morant, and who?
You don't even say it. I'm taking the international.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you don't even have to get to 5. I already had my mind made up.
Right.
You couldn't even get to the American guys.
No, there isn't. Jalen Brunson, throw him in there. Brown, throw in anybody. You can't compete.
For sure, it's very different. And I guess you would look at baseball and say that Shohei Ohtani, Japanese guy, is the face of Major League Baseball.
Absolutely.
Which I guess is not. It's different than basketball because you could have a Dominican player could be the face of baseball. Like there's more of an international flair to it. Yes, exactly. There's more of an international flair to it where I feel like basketball has just been Americans, Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, right? Like it's always been that. But this is like it's moving in a different direction now, which is good.
Sure is.
It's good for the international game.
Exactly. I mean, in terms of high-end talent, like you look at the MVPs, and Joel Embiid is an American, but is not born in the U.S. And you look at Embiid winning the MVP. You look at Jokic winning it 3 times. You look at Giannis. Like it's just a lot of international flair. And I think Luka will get one. I think he might get multiple MVPs. I wouldn't be shocked if Shea Gilgeous-Alexander won an MVP at some point. Wemby, if he stays healthy, is going to likely win multiple MVPs.
He's got to stay healthy. He's also got to, like you said, he's got to. don't know what the right term is. It's like dig in or kind of, I think you use the term like show his chops. Like there's something about him that just needs to get to the next level still.
Yeah.
But he's young, he's raw. Like he was also put in a situation in San Antonio that was a tough situation for a guy to kind of jump into.
Yes.
But he will, at some point, you're right. If he does stay healthy, there's too much talent there. There's too much size. Like he's going to be a dominant player. There's no way around it.
It's difficult to see him as a kid because he's 7'4", right? Like it's almost an oxymoron. Like you're too big to be childish or immature,
Right.
Right? But he is. Like he's
like a wet noodle.
Exactly. Like even today, as Leo's pointed out, you pointed out at 4, like he didn't have a huge impact on this game. He didn't take over the game, and he's 19. Like of course he did. It's a massive moment for him. Like he's playing for France in Paris at the Olympic Games, massive game against a tough competition.
Yeah.
Like naturally, it's going to take him a while. But you give him 4 or 5 years. If he ends up being lucky enough to have a 20-year career, this guy's going to put together some seasons that are absolutely absurd.
I guess that's the thing about basketball, too. I remember when Scotty Barnes had his first year, like I think I was saying, like, let's go. Second year, it takes off from there, and it doesn't really work that way in basketball. Like, it does take a little bit of time. So, a young guy like that, he needs 4 or 5 years. And I think you pointed out at the time, like, I wouldn't be so ambitious at that point for a young guy. Like, he's not just going to take the league by storm at such a young age. It takes time.
Always
took Giannis time. Like, it just does.
It always does. It always does. All right, Keegan Matheson coming up in about 25 minutes. Confirm or deny at 5:30. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, confirm or deny in about 40 minutes. We'll tell you where the Leafs front office ranked in the Athletics rankings. According to the fans who voted, their confidence in the front office, all 32 teams. We'll get to that in about 10 minutes. This takes confidence. I think I'm impressed by this. I read this earlier today, and I'm hoping I didn't get duped. Like every once in a while, right? You get duped.
It happens.
You read something and you're like, I'm going to talk about that. And then afterwards, someone goes, that actually wasn't real.
Especially when it's a blue check mark now.
Yeah.
Anyone can have a blue check mark.
See, that's exactly it. Like you rely on Twitter and you're like, oh, obviously that's someone real. Like it has to be if it's a blue check mark. But this one is courtesy of Pete Thamel, who is a senior writer for ESPN, college football, one of the original blue checkmark guys. He has reported, and others have picked up on this, FIU is a college, or I guess university in Florida. Pitbull, you know Pitbull? Are you familiar with his music?
I believe he's also known as Mr. Worldwide.
Mr. Worldwide, that's right. Green light. Green light. He is purchasing the name rights to FIU's football stadium. He's expected to pay the school $1.2 million per year for the next 5 years to change the name of the FIU stadium to Pitbull Stadium. Why is Pitbull the first guy to do this? Like when you think of how many celebrities and how many recording artists who are so arrogant, have so much money, how is Pitbull the guy who's like, you know what I'm going to do is buy a stadium name and just make it Pitbull Stadium?
I'll explain it to you.
Okay.
Pitbull started out, it was Mr. 305. 305 is the area code for where he's from in
That
Florida.
in Miami?
I guess.
Okay.
He's Mr. 305. He got so big, then he was Mr. Worldwide.
I see.
So when you go from Mr. 305 to Mr. Worldwide,
Yeah.
you become this like conglomerate where you're just taking things over, and now he's taken over a football stadium, and you need to refer to it
As Pitbull Stadium.
Yes.
Like I actually have a large appreciation for this because, and I know there's other people out there saying, why the hell didn't I think of that? Like if I'm Drake and I have that kind of money, why are you not calling up University of Toronto right now? I don't know the name of their stadium. I doubt there's even naming rights. It might cost them like $50.
He might already have a stadium.
I want Drake Stadium.
Well,
If I'm Drake, I want Drake Stadium.
I guess Drake Stadium, but he has OVO Center here in Toronto.
I
but
guess
it's
you're
not
right.
like a spectator place.
Yeah, I mean, there's no fans that can be saying, like
Yeah.
I got tickets, I'm going down to see the game at Drake Stadium.
But
maybe the weekend, or maybe Justin Bieber can step in.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they can all pool their money, and the next time Scotiabank's up, they all put in their money, and every year it's a different name.
Yeah.
Right? It's Bieber Arena, then it's the Drake.
The Drake.
Just the Drake.
Yeah. People are going to
And
say,
then
I
the
love
weekend.
the Drake.
And Yeah, we can get, all our biggest artists or whatever. They can all put their money together. Maybe we need to start doing that. Maybe I got to talk to Owen Noodles. We got to pull some money together. We need to buy the naming rights of a stadium in the greater Toronto area. What can we buy?
OHL. Barrie Colts.
Can we get the Colts?
Could you get the Colts? I don't know what it's
How
called
much would
anymore.
that cost for it to be Bryan Hayes Stadium?
I don't know. OverDrive
Stadium.
Yeah.
Because if Pitbull did it, we got to do it.
You got it.
I can't have Pitbull being the only guy with the foresight to put his name and say, screw it, I got that kind of money. I'm going to buy the naming rights of a stadium.
I wonder who's next. And then wouldn't you do this? Wouldn't you buy it and then have like a residency there? Like
Yes.
Almost like a Vegas thing, but pick a city you like. It doesn't have to be Vegas. It could
Right.
be Memphis. It could
Totally.
be, I don't know, it could be anywhere. I guess
Anywhere, man.
Somewhere where you can actually afford the naming rights. Like I think in Toronto, Scotiabank, it's like $20 million a year.
I believe it was the largest naming right deal ever.
Right.
Like now, I think maybe Staples, when it turned to crypto.com, might have surpassed it. But I'm pretty sure Scotiabank, like it was absurd the amount of money they paid.
Dude, OverDrive
Absurd.
Stadium coming to a city near you.
Yeah, probably more of a town.
Yes.
I don't know if it's going to be a city, but
town.
can we get to like Keswick? Does Keswick have like a park that everyone's fond of?
I'm telling you, there's an
Naming rights
OHL
somewhere.
city out there that's dying to have
You think so?
OverDrive.
Guelph? Maybe Guelph, right?
Sudbury. It's the Sudbury Community Arena. Maybe
Okay,
it's the
OverDrive Community Arena.
Yeah.
The OverDrive Community
The
Arena.
OverDrive community. It is a community.
We
though.
want it.
People who listen to OverDrive. It's
We want it. We'll pay for it. Not a lot, but we're willing to pay. Okay? Someone reach out and give me a name and a stadium that I can personally purchase. Hour 2 coming up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2.